Well, good morning. Thanks, Christian. I appreciate that, man. My name is Mike. If this is your first time at Risen City, I'm one of the pastors here at the church. It's so good to be with you this morning. I hope that you have felt welcomed, and this is a place where you could definitely call home. It's what we strive to create on a Sunday morning practically for people, a home to call their own, that we can come and be part of the family of God together. And we're just excited to be here doing that. I hope everyone here today is doing well. I do pray for that. That's just not a cliche that we say. There's times in our weeks that we take to pray for our church, to pray for Sunday morning, to pray for who's ever going to be here. And so we do pray that you're doing well, but we also recognize the fact that life isn't always awesome. Right? It isn't always great. As Jeremy said at the beginning of our service today, that sometimes it's all sunshine, and he said rainbows, which I thought was interesting. It's cool, right? Sunshines and rainbows and unicorns. It's a great little thought. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes things aren't awesome. Sometimes things are in seasons of heartache and heartbreak and trial. And sometimes we feel like we can't actually bring that into church. Sometimes we feel like we're not allowed to show ourselves weak, show ourselves broken. But in the grace of God, it allows us to come and be real. Allows us to come and be honest with where we are, that this is the place where it truly is okay to not be okay, because the grace of God is welcoming us as we are. It could be the best day of our life or the worst one. It's the same grace. It's the same invitation. So if you're here today, no matter where you've been at or what you've been walking through or what you've come in, I pray today that you would just know that this is the place to be, the perfect place to be, where we can be led to a deepening relationship with Jesus. For we believe that is what our souls truly need in all seasons of life, in the good and bad. More of Him, more wisdom, more of His Spirit. So we want to create spaces as a church where that happens. We aren't about creating just another religious service. There are many churches in our city, many good churches, right? We aren't just wanting to be another one. We want to be a church that's not about the ceremony, but truly about the encounter with God. That we'll take a moment to be in the space together and pray and hope that when we come together as a church, that we're not just doing a service, that we are meeting Jesus. And we are leaving this place different than when we walked in. We believe that in a moment, in a morning, everything about life can change. That when in one encounter with God, that we can go from Saul to Paul with one moment. Right, that we can be challenged and trained and be given new life in Him. And so we're just excited to do that today. It's the reason why we exist. The way that we say it is that we exist to lead people to a soul-changing relationship with Jesus. It's why we do what we do. It's what we're about. And one of the ways that we do that is through the Word of God. We do believe that the Bible is a good word from God. It's not some old, antiquated book that needs updates and revisions, but a word from God for us, for our joy, for our good. And so we're going to open it up and be in it today and allow it to challenge us and change us and move in our hearts today. So if you have a Bible or a phone, if you want to open up to the book of Ecclesiastes, that's where we're going to be. We're in the middle of a series on the book of Ecclesiastes, and so we're going to continue in that this morning. If you're unfamiliar with the Bible, well then, number one, first off, so glad that you're here and being part of what we are doing today. I want to help you understand where we are at. If you don't have a Bible at all, we would love to get you one, so just let me know. And at minimum, I'm going to have it on the screen behind me in just a moment. Ecclesiastes is found in what Christians call the Old Testament. It's part of the Bible where God chooses to reveal Himself, His nature, His character, His justice, His goodness, His love, His covenantal grace through a very broken and interesting people called Israelites. And it's a very sometimes immoral story, sometimes really awesome, sometimes crazy, sometimes unexpected. It's a very interesting, very human story, but through it we see God always faithful, always good, always being the covenantal, loving God that we know Him to be. And part of that story is what we call the wisdom literature. It's these books that sort of speak to how to live well in the world that God made. And one of those books happens to be Ecclesiastes. It's a philosophical book. It's a theological book. It's a crisis book, you might say. And so we've been following Cole at the main sort of character's journey over the last few weeks. And so we're going to continue to do that today, starting in chapter 5, verse 10. Chapter 5, verse 10. Here's what he says. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This is also vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them or want to steal them from you. Very encouraging word right there. And what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? Sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. There is a grievous evil that I have seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt, and those riches were lost in a bad venture. And he is father of a son, but he has nothing in his hand. And as he came from his mother's womb, so shall he go again, naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil. Just so you know, right, your money doesn't go with you when you die. Right, like, I know we talk about that, but it's actually true. You don't take it with you. None. The stuff translates. It all just ends up rusting in some garbage somewhere in 100 years from now. All the nice fancy toys, everything. Right? Good morning. This is also a grievous evil. Just as he came, so shall he go. And what gain is there to him who toils for the wind? Moreover, all his days he eats in darkness and in much vexation and sickness and anger. Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possession and power to enjoy them, to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, for this is the gift of God. Here's the question. Have you ever been in a disagreement, we'll call it, in a little argument where what you're actually arguing about isn't what you're arguing about? Anyone ever had that before? Right? Married couples specifically, right? Ever been in that space? Right? Back when I was dating Emily, this was a few years ago, we were hanging out at my mom's house, and we're watching this movie. It's an older movie. It's This Is War. Anyone remember that movie? It's like Chris Pine and Tom Hardy and Reese Witherspoon, the best friends and spies. They fight over the girl. Classic rom-com with a twist, because you know that's what every single movie is nowadays. It's all the same plot line. I'm not going to get into it. Here's the thing, right? We were watching this movie, and we had to skip like 30 seconds. I think my brothers made a distraction, did something, made a noise, whatever it was. I don't really remember, but we missed about 30 seconds of this movie. And I didn't really care because I didn't really watch the movie anyway, right? But Emily really wanted to go back and rewatch what she missed. And so I said, babe, get over it. That's not the point. It's an inconsequential little bit of the movie. Here's what happened. Don't worry about it. She's like, no, I want to go back. Can we please just rewind? And it's like literally just a few buttons to rewind. But I just decided that this was definitely a place that I was going to, stake my ground on. So I said, no, babe, it doesn't really matter all that much. It's just like 30 seconds. Get over it. No, Mike, I want you to go back. And when she says, Mike, like it's serious, right? And you need to go back. I want to watch this. I said, babe, like get over it. Here's what happened. It's not important. I keep repeating myself as if she's going to change her mind after that point. So then at the point, I'm like, okay, I have to realize that there's got to be some compromise here. And so the wise young man that I was, I went back like 15 seconds. Not the full 30. We sort of give each other a little bit, right? And said, babe, there you go. It's far enough. She says, no, I want to go back all the way. At this point, you can see that our tones are getting a little bit, elevated, and our tensions are rising. And I do eventually give in and go back, and we make the night of it. And now there's just this weird, awkward, we got to watch this movie and hang out with each other, but don't really like each other right now kind of space, And then, because we're dating, it's the car ride home, which I got to drive her back to her place. And, it's silent, as they tend to be after a nice evening together like that. And you have to just break the silence, because what I'm thinking right now is this woman that I'm with actually this uptight about 30 seconds of a video? Like, what in the world is this? And so I have to ask the question, like, babe, what is going on? And she says, it's not about the video. Now, at this point, I'm just like, what the heck just happened? Because we've spent 4 hours fighting over this 30 seconds of a video, and apparently it's not about the video. She's like, no, it's not about that, Mike. It's because you don't listen to me. And I was like, what are you talking about, I don't listen to you, right? That's totally, she goes, no, this is not the big issue. The video is just a video. It's a pattern, Mike. You don't listen to me. And I could probably admit now, a few years removed from the fight, she probably was right. But that didn't help in the moment. But all she kept saying is that there's this deeper issue here, Mike. You have a pattern. You don't listen. So it wasn't just the movie. This was the last straw. This was what broke the camel's back. This is what made it all worse. This was just one little thing that just proved to me you don't ever listen to me. You know what's funny? Those fights suck. That's not what's funny. But don't you just like not being in that space where I have no idea what we're dealing with right now? It's just husbands, I can see head shaking because it happens, right? You just know it happens. Here's the thing though. When it comes to money, it's the exact same thing. There's always something a little deeper. When it comes to loving money and why we appreciate money and why we want to gain money, there's always something a little bit deeper than what the actual issue is. When we say that we love money or are greedy, it's not simply that we're about the thing itself. And today we've got to figure out what is those deeper things. Why do we love money? See, Cole, he's on this journey, and he's been asking the question of the meaning of life and why do we do what we do, and he's been exploring different spaces of the world in which we exist. He's on pleasure and legacy and death and seasons and time and injustice. And today he turns his attention to something that, if we're going to be honest, we all think about a lot. Money. Money. Right? And if you've been tracking with us for the last few weeks, he's a man who's this Jewish thinker and this sage, and he's been on this sort of crisis of faith, asking some deep questions. And we've been saying the whole time that that's actually a really good thing, that our faith is allowed to have questions inbred in it, that we can be asking and exploring and using our minds to understand, that that's not an opposite thing of faith. In fact, a rational faith, a faith that seeks understanding, is actually part of what we call Christianity, by the way. But the issue we have with Kohelet is the way he's going about his journey is from what we've been calling a functional atheism, a perspective that puts himself at the center of the universe, that his wants, his needs, his thoughts, his reason, his comprehension, his understanding, his observation, his experiences, his feelings become the highest authority on what is right, true, good, and proper, that he has replaced God essentially with himself. Right, that he'll sing the songs and say the prayers and acknowledge that God exists, but come Monday morning, right, he just does what he wants and thinks the way he wants. It doesn't really let God affect every single moment that he is living. And with that perspective, as he looks at the world, he has called the meaning, he's called these activities Havel, right, vapor, chasing the wind. They are a mystery, they're enigmatic, there's meaning in there, but I can't find it. And as we go about life, we're just never really going to know the point of all this stuff. We can't really put it into its perspective. But we've been saying, no, Cole, that you're wrong. God has made the world with purpose and reason, that we can know it, that we can know Him and work for His kingdom and be about redemption, that there are things that we are aware of that ground our life. And so as we've been journeying with Him, we've been correcting Him and trying to figure out really what is the answer to some of these questions. And today, right, He turns His gaze to this thing that if we're, I think, real honest, it's been plaguing the human heart for thousands and thousands of years, this thing called greed, the love of money. And he's actually pretty right, because he says it doesn't satisfy. It's interesting because money comes up a few times in this book, actually. It comes up in chapter 5, chapter 6, comes up again in chapter 10, and chapter 11. In fact, Jesus himself, when he taught on earth, some scholars will say up to a quarter of his teaching somehow deal with money and our affection for it. That this is a big sort of Bible theme, how we humans love money. Now, before we go on, I already know there's some of us skeptical today because, of course, the preacher man's talking about money. All right, church and money has never really has a good reputation together. But here's the thing I want to make sure we understand today, all right? That we believe as Christians that every single area of life comes under the jurisdiction of God. That there's not one thing in our life that's outside of His authority, that's outside of His description. And so when we come to church, right, we can talk about literally every single thing. Right? Your marriage, your family, sexuality, money, it's all under the umbrella of God's authority. Because it's interesting to me, because I've actually met people who would rather talk about sex in church than money, which seems weird. But it's how we often operate, that money is so private. Money is our thing. Money is what we need to wrestle with. But today we're going to open up a little bit. And why? Because here's the thing. I don't need the money that you have. God doesn't need the money that you have. But what I do want for you, and I want you to understand this today, is I want more rest. I want more joy. I want you to know what blessing is. I want you to know what generosity looks like. I want you to know what it's like to be like Jesus. Because here's what I know. God doesn't need your bank account, but He wants your heart. And Jesus says, follow your money, you know where your heart is. So there's this often misquoted verse in Scripture written by a man named Paul the Apostle to a younger man named Timothy, where he says, right, it's the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Right? All kinds of different evils and sins come from loving money. Not, as is often said, money is the root of all evil. Because money is just a thing. It's an amoral part of creation. It's like bowling and chicken wings, right? It's just a thing that is in creation, right? It's how we use it. It's how we approach it. It's how we view it. It's what the hope we hope comes out of it. It's the way that we engage with the power that money has. It actually begins to see where sin is, which means something interesting. Is money and the love of money is not a rich person's issue. We often assume that the rich people, they're the greedy ones, right? As if what really defines rich in our context, how do we view that in all these different ways? Because it doesn't actually matter. Because the issue isn't the size of your bank account. The issue before us today is the size of your affection for it. How much you love it. How much you hope in it. See, here's the funny thing is, as I've met as many rich people who are definitely greedy and definitely selfish and definitely love money as I've met poor people who do. It just sounds different. It just comes across differently. The way that we talk about it sounds a little bit different than the rich or the poor. But underneath it, we all are human, and we all love money. And Colette lays it out to us all today, no matter where you are. If you love money, you will be left unsatisfied. If you love money, you will be left restless and joyless and wandering and hungry. If you pursue it, you will be left empty. The question is, why? Why? All right, and it's something that we've been tracking along for the last series a little bit. It comes up almost every week in some way, shape, or form. It's this idea of the sin known as idolatry. That we like to make created things, lesser things, into gods. That we like to take the things that God literally made and let them occupy the space that God was meant to occupy. That we assume that we can get out of these things the very stuff that God himself has promised to us by way of him and him alone. See, why do we love money? It's not because of the stuff of it. It's not because we like paper and we like coins, right? Some of us might be a coin collector. Right? If you want to spend more money on a coin than what it's actually worth, go ahead. That's between you and how you manage your money, right? That's a whole other thing. But we don't like money just for the stuff. We like it because of what we assume it will bring to us. There's a deeper idol, actually. To love money is just the surface, scratching what's on the top. What is that deeper idol? What is that thing underneath that we assume we're going to gain and have if we actually have money? What is the power that we're after? Because money does have power. I hope you understand that. That's not necessarily a bad thing, right? If you have more money, you have more opportunity. You can buy more things. You can experience more things. You can help more people. There is a power in money. It's how do we wield it, and what do we want out of it? See, some of us want control. And we think money will bring me that. I can control people. I can control my environment. I can control my surroundings. I can control my kids. I can control my friends. I can control their opinion of me. I want control. Some of us want status. If I have money, then I'm someone important. I feel sort of insecure, but if I have stuff, if I can wear good clothes and be with important people and go to the right places, then that means I'm someone. I've arrived. I've achieved more than my dad ever could. I've made a better life for myself. I've shown myself worthy. Look at all that I have gained. Some of us want comfort. I just want to have a comfortable, easy life. I just want to feel some things and set up a lifestyle and have a nice little home and have my nice little things and I just want to be comfortable. So I gotta have money to sustain that. Some of us want security. That I want to protect myself from a bad day. That I assume if I have money in the bank, then I'll be okay. Then everything's just going to work out. That I'll be peaceful then. If I can get to that bracket of income, if I can get to that salary, then I'll be at rest. Then I'll be at peace. Then I'll be happy. Then I'll feel secure. Then I'll feel like somebody. Then I will. It's this if-then idolatry that we have, that we assume that money can bring us. And as much as it might sound silly, emotionally, this is where we go. Money will save me. It's a kind of salvation. It's why there's so much fear and anxiety wrapped up in the keeping of and the having of money. Because if I have it, then I'm at rest. If I have it, then I'm there. But if I lose it, something is missing. My life actually goes to a place of devastation because the God that I sought after is dying before me. See, this is not just practical fear when it comes to money. It's theological. If I base my hope and my future and my identity and my value and my joy in something so finite, right? I make it into a God. What I have done is elevated my soul to depend on this thing that can be gone in a moment. In the moment that it is, it's not only that my money is gone, but my hope of heaven begins to fade. The clothes, the identity, the status, my paradise is falling. My God is dying before me, and I see no hope of His coming back. So I actually go into a deeper level of fear than rational, because it's not just a rational fear. It's deeper than that. There's something underneath the surface. And it's funny because when we really talk about money and how it doesn't really satisfy and how it can't really bring us what we want, intellectually we know it. We see it. Colette calls it out here too. Right? You won't be satisfied. It won't actually fulfill. Once you have more, you want more, because enough never seems to be enough. And if you have more, then you can spend more and have more and sustain more. Then you begin building a lifestyle. Now I have to sustain and maintain my lifestyle. And if I have that, then I can't lose it. So now I got to worry about not just gaining it, but keeping it and not losing it to someone. So now I actually can increase my stress. Although I might have some good experiences, I have to make sure that I can maintain. Because what happens if I lose? And what happens if I get to this place? So now my mind is running in circles because I have to have. And now we build a life around the acquisition of and the protection of our money. We will organize our thoughts and our prayers and our life around this unwise wrestle with this thing called wealth. Let's be real today. Let's be real, right? When we think about our life and the stresses that we carry, the fights we have with our spouses, the conversations around what we're dealing with right now, how often is money tied to those things? Not having enough, needing more, want to pay off this debt, having to deal with this thing, not having this over here. How much? It's wrapped up in everything. I wouldn't even go so far to say this, and this might hurt a little bit, but we will often spend more spiritual energy at the altar of money than at the one of the provider. We will claim to worship Jesus, but then bow our knees at the altar of money way more often. Think that I can just get it and have it, and then I'll be in that space. And it's interesting to me because Jesus says that we're not to worry about what we'll eat, drink, or wear. Because if the sparrow's taken care of and you are the children of God, then why would you not think that God would do that? How many of us live that free, though? How many of us live that free? In fact, I would say most of us, when we hear something like that, we call that unwise. We will hear that and think that's pretty flighty. It's pretty sort of loose there, Mike. We have to have some concern. But here's the thing. Worry and being unwise are not the same thing. That you can be wise, truly wise. The Bible actually talks a lot about how to be wise with our money. It talks about a lot from Proverbs, from Jesus, and all these places that speak to how Christians are to deal with money. That means we actually don't have to worry. That I can be as free as Jesus says, trusting in the great provision of my God, my Father, who says He's going to give me good gifts. He's going to bless His children. I can live in that space, still pursuing the wisdom and the stewardship that God has. Because Christians are called to be free from the lie that money is enough. That money will sustain me. That money will uphold me. That money will be what I need. That it keeps me safe. And here's the thing, right? Like if we actually put our security and our hope and our future and our joy in something so finite, we're asking to be devastated. Like as Christians, right, we're supposed to place all those things right on the feet of Jesus, the one who calls Himself the Good Shepherd. The one who is faithful, the one who is present, the one who promises to provide our needs, who says, I'm watching after you. Like Christians, we are supposed to be free from fear because we are full of the faithfulness of God. That we can trust that He is as good as He says. Before service today, when we were doing our team rally, Christian was talking about this, how God truly is good and only good. And if that's true, why do I fear? Unless maybe I have another God in my life. That's not as secure. That's not as sure. You see, in Cole, that talks about it in the second section that we read today, that there was a man, and he had a lot of money, but he lost it all in one bad venture, one bad investment. See, it doesn't matter how business savvy you are, how wise you might think you are, right? A bad deal, right? A bad business partner, a thief, it can be gone. Everything can be gone. Then what happens? Right? This man, he says, he goes to the grave as he came out of the womb naked, not having anything. He lost literally it all. You know what's so depressing is you go back a decade ago when the stock market crashed, and there's this really horrible stories of high-level, powered, and rich people just committing suicide after suicide after suicide when everything was gone. When their hope left, when their God died, life itself was not worth living because everything they had hoped in was ripped from them. Here's the problem, though. When we say that, most of us in this room today will go like this. Well, I'm not them. I don't have that kind of money. I'll never be in that space. Right? And this is the problem with love of money and greed. This is the problem with it, is we are blind to our own money love. We are blind to our own greed. Because we can always compare, right? We can always say someone has more, someone's worse, someone spends with worse patterns than I do, someone saves for a different reason, someone does this differently. Do you see the kind of shoes that they wear? Look at the ones that I have. I don't have the same thing. Do you see how many trips that they go on? I don't do that. I'm not like that. I could never be greedy like those people over there. And because we can always compare, we can always hide. And this is the hardness of it, because some of us want different things out of money, as I said. There's different issues. So therefore, the greed looks different. Like, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but I have. In marriages, there's often a saver and a spender. Everyone ever knows that before, right? Like there's this weird dynamic that somehow someone who loves spending money and someone who loves saving it somehow just end up together, right? It's a good balance at times. But like in my marriage, my wife is very generous. She's a very generous woman. And in my younger years, before I had matured, right, I would criticize her generosity and call my cheapness holy. I would look at her and say that that's not a good way to be, when you should be more like me and save and call my selfishness and my love of security wisdom. And that's what we do. Well, you act differently towards money than me, so I am the right one. And I find it often, though, let's be real, that the savers in those relationships tend to have the air of superiority. Right? But the thing about it, the reason why it's so difficult is because were there purchases or things that maybe Emily should have spent? Sure. Right? We all got our issues. But because I looked like I was saving and concerned, that gave me this air of what? Better. I'm not as greedy. I'm not as this. But all that was is I wanted security. Because my idol was easier to cover over. Because what I loved money for was easier to justify. I called myself good. And that's the problem. That's the problem. We can justify our greed so easily. It's so hard to actually see. And there's actually really a good example of this in a book called Counterfeit Gods. If you've never read this book, it's by Timothy Keller. He's a pastor and author in New York. It's an amazing book. I would get, if you read one book this year, if you're going to read one book out of 365 days, because that's all you can do, read this book, Counterfeit Gods. By the way, that was a challenge. If you read one book this year, then we got to have other conversations, all right? And he gives this example about how it's hard to see greed when it's easy to see other sins. Because other sins are pretty obvious, right? And he gave this example, right? You don't end up in bed with someone not your spouse and commit adultery, and halfway through go, "You're not my wife?" Right? Like it's pretty obvious at that point what you're doing. Like you can't sort of justify that one out a little bit. You're committing a sin. It's pretty obvious. But we can't do the same thing with greed, with the love of money. Which means this: we have to do the hard work today as Christians to figure out what my deeper idol is. This sermon's not necessarily about loving money. It's what do you actually love from money? What do you want? I pray that you write that question down, and this week take some time to think, what do I want from my money? Secondly, I have another question, another thought to help us combat this love of money. It's a very simple question. Who owns the money that you have? Like when you talk about your money, right? What's the language that you use? Because your language exposes the way you view it, how you define your relationship to it. So are you an owner of your money or a steward? An investor, a manager? See, this is the difference between Christianity and sort of the rest of the world. When we look at our money, is we say that we own nothing. I don't own the money that I have. It's not mine. Right? That I am simply a manager, a steward of the resource and the riches of God that He's chosen to bless me with. It's not mine. It's not for me. It's not like I can say that I am the possessor of this money. I am simply the hands that are chosen by God to invest it well. That is my relationship to money. So who owns your money? Because here's the thing, right? Can we be real today? You will stand before God and give an account for how you accounted for your money. It won't be before yourself. You're not going to stand in front of the mirror and tell yourself how you did. You'll be standing before God, and He will ask you, how did you steward the money that I gave you? Little or a lot, it doesn't matter. Whether you have more than you could ever ask for or not as much as you want. The heart of the Christian is the same. I'm going to steward every single penny I got from God for the glory of God, the good of His kingdom, and the good of others. That is my call as a steward of God, as a Christian, that you own everything, God. It's yours. When you think about your money, who owns it? Who owns it? If God owns your money, money becomes simply a tool to be used, not a God to be worshipped. If you own your money, money is a thing to be spent on yourself. If God owns your money, when He gives you commands on how to use it, those are actual commands that define how I relate myself to money. If I own my money, then God's commands become maybe some noble suggestions. Oh, generosity, that's a good thing. Giving to the poor, it's a noble cause. But I can't do that right now. I got to save for this and do this over here. I got some projects on the go. And maybe one day those noble things I'll get to. If God owns your money, its purpose, its true power is to be used and invested in the right things of the kingdom of God. If you own your money, it's simply used to be invested in your wants and your needs. If God owns your money, it becomes just a thing. And a thing can't save you, and a thing can't sustain you, and a thing can't secure you, and a thing can't provide you hope, and a thing can't identify you, but Jesus can. And I become free from the entanglement of my love of money. Who owns the money in your possession? If you're a Christian, you don't. Even if you think that you do. Even if you think that you do. No. Here's another level that we have to get to today when it comes to greed and money. Is greed and loving money can also look very passive. Very, very, very passive, right? It's not just going out and doing some bad things with our money or spending frivolously or being wasteful, right, that you would assume maybe greed might look like. There's actually a passivity here because if you've been in church long enough, you probably have heard this before, that holiness and righteousness isn't simply just avoiding bad things, but actively pursuing the things of God. It's not just avoiding bad, it's doing good. It's not just stopping some negative things, but it's actually pursuing with my whole heart the things that God desires. And by the way, one of the hallmarks of Christian money management is wise generosity. Wise, lavish generosity. Wise, lavish, sometimes irrational generosity. So here's the thing. We are called to be known as generous people because we serve a generous God. That we have a gospel of a God who literally gave up everything, who Paul says became nothing, became poor so that you and I might become rich. Who left heaven's glories and walked on earth so that you and I could one day have heaven's glory, who gave up life itself so you and I could have life. That this is the gospel that we proclaim, the God that we serve, and we are called to mimic an example of our life after that man, to live open-handed like Jesus did. And so here's the question. This might be hard to hear today because I'm going to make some statements and some demands of us, but I pray it hits right where God needs it to today. And this is my thought today. If we are not striving, not hoping, not wishing, we are not striving to create a lifestyle of generosity, then we are being greedy. Then we are using the resources God has given us to bless ourselves simply and not those beyond us. That if I am not specifically and purposely planning in my home budgets to give the way God has commanded me to give to the mission of the church, to the poor and the orphan, then I am not stewarding my money well. If I'm not striving to create a lifestyle where generosity is not limited to the margin months, I'm not doing what God has called me to do. If I am working to simply sustain a comfortable life that leaves all the generous things to maybe if one day, I am not stewarding the way God has called me to steward. If generosity in my home is simply reduced to one-off little moments where maybe because there's a little extra money in the bank, I'll give today, then I'm not stewarding the way God wants, and I stand myself against the justice of God. Jesus has called us to live a little bit differently. If I'm constantly lived trapped to personal debt, to buy a bunch of things that I thought I needed, to make some bad decisions to cover them now. So now I cannot no longer be generous because I'm so trapped in those places. That is not stewarding the way God intended. If my life isn't centered around, in a financial sense, wise generosity, I'm not stewarding as God would have me doing. And what we have is a love of money. Not Jesus. Not Jesus. It might sound offensive. It might sound weird to say these things, that there can be this kind of demand on your life, but Jesus is constantly countercultural, by the way. The upside-down kingdom He expects us to live in, that the money that we have is given. It's a gift. We work hard and we can reap the fruit of our labor, but it is by the blessing of God. So then I go and steward it for His goodness, steward it for His name, steward for the good of my people and those around me, that I use money no longer for me, because I am freed by the gospel to be like the God who's provided. I am free to be generous like He was to me, that my heart's not entangled, my heart is not woven around my love of stuff, of power, of money, of control, of security, of whatever it is. And so I can just give like Jesus gave, that I can be known for this. See, Jesus goes against our natural grain of selfish love and calls us to be surrendered fully to the faithfulness of God. But He says that you can know where your heart is by where your money goes. You can figure out how surrendered you are by how you spend. The really good discipline to get into is to go open up your bank account statement, go look at your Visa bill, and just watch where your money tends to be spent. What are the patterns? What are the habits? What is the lifestyle that you are curating and building? What are your debt patterns? What are you spending on? What takes the bulk of your margin? What takes the bulk of your decisions? How are you organizing your budget? Because you want to know what you love. Jesus says, follow that. Follow that. Now, before you hear what I'm not saying, because people tend to go to the opposite extreme then, and assume that Christianity is then this life of poverty, of this sort of poverty-stricken existence. But that's not the case. Because even in our last few verses today that we read, Colette says that there actually is a gift of God that's given to us that we might enjoy the wealth He provides. That there's joy in what we can have. If God blesses us and we can increase, that is fine and that is good. In fact, I hope there's some rich Christians, because the kingdom needs some finances, right? We got to figure this thing out. But the point is this: you are allowed to reap the benefits of your labor, knowing that God's giving you the power to enjoy them. That's His blessing that makes it come. It's His blessing that allows you to enjoy it, but that you are blessed ultimately to be a blessing to those who don't have it. That with greater blessing comes greater responsibility, not simply greater joy. That we have a calling as Christians to, even in our greatest enjoyment, even in our great resources, to always challenge the pattern of our natural consumption. That maybe I can spend and think and organize differently. Because, here's the thing. If you have a business, say, right, and it goes really well this year, awesome. I'm actually very much excited for you. If you want to take your wife to Hawaii to celebrate that, go ahead. Right, go sit on the beach and soak up the sun and drink some pineapple juice, put on a sunscreen on. It's wonderful. Go ahead. If it's your third trip this year, you give nothing to the church and none to the orphans, that's a joke. And not only is it wrong, it's embarrassing to call yourself a Christian. That's not what God's called us. If you would rather spend more money on your shoe collection than giving to the one who has nothing, then that's embarrassing to label ourselves Christian. If we are more willing to spend $5 every week on some crap drink at Starbucks but not actually give to the church, then maybe we have some priority issues. This is the call of God, to look at every part of our life and understand that we have to give according to how He is called, not according to what I desire. Sometimes we need to push back the selfishness in our hearts and actively seek to set up a life of generosity. Because you don't just get over the love of money. You fight it. Grace frees us. But Paul says, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. There's some work to our grace today. So I want to end our time today with 5 things. 5 things that I think that can help us fight greed by making them part of our budgets. I'm going to get real practical today. 5 areas of generosity I think everyone needs to have, and they're going to be on the screen behind me. Generosity towards the church, generosity towards our family, generosity towards our marriage, generosity towards justice, and generosity towards your future. 5 areas of generosity that I pray you would put into your life. Here's what I'm saying. Number 1, generosity toward the church, right? We talk about a lot in church that God commands us and says we need to give towards the church, right? If that's not part of our intentionality in our budget making, we won't do it. There'll always be something else that seems to be more urgent and important. But God says that we are to give to his people, give to his institution. He will bless when we give. Now, most people at this point will say, let's talk about the tithe. Hear me out. If you want to get all strict about giving 10% or not, if you're going to go by the Old Testament, it's more like 28. So if you're going to be that, give 28. I'll take it. Right? But we go by a principle of the tithe, the first fruits, that we want to give God our first, not our leftovers, not after everything's done. We want to organize our life intentionally around living off less than what we've made. Be generous toward the church, to the mission of God through the local church. It's an act of trust. It's an act of wisdom. It's an act of worship. God, I believe you can do more with that 90% than I could do with the 100. So I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to act in faith, and I'm going to give. Now, number 2, generosity towards your family. This one should be somewhat self-evident in this way, that obviously we work and we gain money to live, to have a home, to have clothes and put food on the table and to take care of our family. But we also should be trying to work out our life and choosing to live less than maybe we could so we could have more opportunity to create experience and bless our family, bless our children, bless our spouses. And I found it to be the case, and hopefully it's not true in this room, but I found it to be the case that often more dads than it seems to be moms would rather spend money on themselves than their own children. It's way easy to justify spend if I get to enjoy it, but if my kids want something, then that's an issue. That's not the heart of a father, by the way. That's the heart of a selfish, immature young man. And as a father, we should strive to create a home in which our children know my dad will bless me as we reflect the heart of God. It's not simply about providing, but choosing maybe to construct a lifestyle that is simpler for the sake of providing blessing to my children. That in fact, I would go so far to say this, that we should be so lavish towards our home that our kids never once doubt that my dad won't do something for me. Now there's wisdom. There's wisdom. We do got to say no. But I pray that we'll have the heart of the Father who lavishly pours out good gifts on his children. Number 3 is generosity towards your marriage. If you don't have I know if you're not married, understandably, one day get there. It's going to be good. Here's the thing, right? When you're setting up your home budget, right? If you don't intentionally put money aside to go on dates and go away and invest into your marriage, you're investing into a bad one. You're investing either way. In my immature days, I used to consider this an expense. Right? Now it's an investment. Choosing to invest into the health of my future marriage. Choosing to invest into the foundation of my family. Choosing to say, God, I'll say no to some things to say yes to my marriage. Do you have a line on your budget that says, I'm going to invest in my marriage? Number 4, generosity towards justice. Generosity towards compassion. Towards the widows and to the orphans. See, here's the call to the Christian, that we intentionally live simpler lives than we could so that we can give it away. That I choose to live off less than I make so I can choose to be generous with those who don't have it. That a line in my budget should be generous towards justice. I'm willing to give away. I'm willing to say, God, if I have that's more than I need, I'm going to take that and I'm going to give to someone who has nothing. In fact, can I challenge you today? I don't mean to speak into my own life too much, but there was a season of my life where Emily and I, we didn't really have an income. And we had a decision to make because we have a sponsor child, an orphan that needs some of our money. And so we had this decision because if we were to stop supporting this young boy, we could have had groceries for about a month and a half with no worries. But we made a decision saying, God, you called us to be generous outside of our own home. So we committed to it and we said, God, we want to do this. And we kept giving and kept supporting. And I can say at the end of that season, we actually came out more than what we had at the beginning. Because God is faithful to those who act according to his word. Are we generous towards justice? Is that a line on our budget? Do we choose to live less so we can give more? And then number 5 today, And Ivan, you come up, man. Generous towards your future. See, this is where wisdom hits us, right? In the book of Proverbs, in fact, it says this, that the wise man not only has an inheritance to his kids, but his kids' kids. That he saves and he invests, that he does good. He makes good financial decisions with wisdom, with stewardship involved, that he saves. So here's the question. Are you saving? Are you investing it? At minimum, are you getting out of debt? Or is that a tomorrow issue? Right? Today is the day where we come together and we say, God, I want to be generous towards my future. I want to make good decisions now that my future person will enjoy. I want to make good decisions now that the one down the road will actually say, that was a very wise thing for you to do, Mike. Thank you for doing that. I want to make future decisions in the moment. Be patient so there can be a harvest later. Are we saving? Which, by the way, if you've noticed on this list, everything is a reduction on what I make. That I'm choosing to say yes to certain things and no to a lot of other things. I'm choosing to live less than what my income demands so I can be wise and generous in the right ways. See, the Christian call is a life of simplicity. A life of less intentionally. A life that says, God, I want to reflect your generosity in everything that I do. Here's the question today. Are you building a life, are you curating a lifestyle that reflects your love of money or love of God? Love of the self or love of generosity? Or are you fighting greed by trying to be generous? Are you asking God to increase you to be a blessing or to increase you just to simply increase you? Because He will not answer that prayer. What are we doing with our love today? If we love money, we will end up simply restless, chasing, insecure. As Colette says, he is right. He has nailed it. This is so true. That if you love money, you will be left empty. You will be left hungry and chasing, right? When you place so much of ourself into something so finite, you might end up, hear me, with full pockets, but you will be left with an empty soul, an anxious heart, and a worried mind. Because if we think that money can fix this, can solve this, right, we will remain broken. Maybe better dressed, let's be real, but still broken. Because dollars make for a really bad soul doctor. It doesn't work. But in Jesus today, we have a freedom. If we know that our affection, our joy, our future, our hope, our safety, our security, our provision is grounded in the unshakable faithfulness of God, then we are free. Because, by the way, that faithfulness is not just something that He does. It's actually who He is. It's grounded in His nature. It's grounded in its character. We see it fully in the gospel that we proclaim as Christians. That when I did not deserve His riches, He poured it out. When I could not earn His love, He lavishly poured it upon me. When I could not deserve grace, He gave it over and over beyond measure. The heart of our God is generosity. The heart of our God is good. The heart of our God is faithful. For God so loved the world, He gave. This is who He is. This is who we are called to be. Jesus said you cannot serve two masters. You either love money or love me. Who do you love today? Who do you love today? What does your life say you love today? And let's be real today. Everyone in this room has an idol called greed. It's sort of a trick question. My heart for us today is to say, how can we repent, God? Search me. Know me, see me, cleanse me, purify me, make me like you. If you're here today and maybe that you don't really know Jesus, and so today was probably a little bit different than what you may have expected, but here's the thing, I want you to know this, that it is possible to be wise with money but not have our hope dependent on it. That we can truly know that God loves us because He gave. But here's the issue. Here's the hard part, right? greed and loving money, these are not just bad ideas. They are sinful. They put you at odds with the generous heart of God, that we will give an account before Him on how we dealt with our life, that we will stand before the King of the universe, the one who poured His own blood out for us, and have to give an account for how we loved money. But luckily, because our God is rich in mercy and great in love, Jesus came and walked on this earth, died a death that my sin deserved, and in that gave me life and salvation and hope. Which is, by the way, the true blessing, the greatest thing, that if I know that my soul has been made right with God, that I have been given the hope of heaven and relationship, then my soul's deepest need is met, and I can know and I can rest secure, unshakable in Jesus. But the thing about it, we have to come and we get to receive that by faith, not by works. Not by being a good person, a good religious person, or even if you gave away all your money and said, well, I'm just going to give to the poor to prove I'm awesome. Then you're just using your generosity as an excuse to be good, which makes God an vice. And God doesn't work like that. Our good works don't earn it. It's by faith that He paid a debt that I couldn't pay on the cross, that His resurrection from the dead gives me a hope that I cannot lose, that He sits on the throne of heaven. But I invite Him now to sit on the throne of my heart and trust and know that as I follow and love and serve this God, life and hope and freedom, salvation are mine. We will stand before God and He will question us as to why we are greedy. And either we will say, God, I come before you in the blood of Jesus because I have been and I'm sorry. Or we will stand before Him and His justice will be upon us. But today, if we come to Jesus, we can be free. We can have life. We can have fullness. And I pray that you would come to Him today. Here's my questions. 3 of them. What do you want out of money? What's the deeper idol in your heart? Number 2 is, who owns the money that you have? Number 3 today. Number 3. What does your lifestyle show? Love money or love God?